Good evening. It's now 6:30. And I'd like to call to order this public hearing of the Cunningham Township Board. The hearing to approve a proposed property tax increase for the town of Cunningham for 2021 is being held today, Monday, December 13th at 6:30. The corporate and special purpose property taxes extended or abated for 2020 were $1,825,178. The proposed corporate property taxes to be levied for 2021 are $2.3 million. This represents a 26% increase over the previous year. The property taxes extended for debt service and public building commission leases for 2020 were $0. The estimated property taxes to be levied for debt service and public building commission leases for 2021 are $0. This represents a 0% increase over the previous year. The total property taxes extended or abated for 2020 were $1,825,178. The estimated total property taxes to be levied for 2021 are $2.3 million. This represents a 26% increase over the previous year. I'd like to call this hearing to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu.
Here.
Mr. Evans.
Here.
Ms. Hersey.
Here.
Ms. Colasetti.
Here.
Ms. Bishop.
Here.
Ms. Wilkin.
Here.
Mr. Quisenberry.
Here.
Mayor Marlin.
Here.
Ms. Chenoweth.
Present.
Mr. Williams.
Here.
Next item is public input for this public hearing on the proposed property tax levy. Does anyone wish to address the Cunningham Town Board on the property tax levy? I'm seeing no hands raised. Okay, with no input on this levy, I'm going to call this hearing adjourned, and we'll move on to the Cunningham Town Board meeting. And when you're ready, Ms. Clark, please let me know.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Cunningham Town Board for Monday, December 13th, 2021. Could we have a roll call vote?
Ms. Wu.
Here.
Mr. Evans.
Here.
Ms. Hersey.
Here.
Ms. Colasetti.
Here.
Ms. Bishop.
Here.
Ms. Wilkin.
Here.
Mr. Quisenberry.
Here.
Mayor Marlin.
Here.
Ms. Chenoweth. Ms. Chenoweth. Mr. Williams.
Here.
Next item is approval of the minutes for the November 8th, 2021 meeting and the November 29th, 2021 special meeting. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Is that Mary Alice? Okay. Is there a second? Moved by Mary Alice, seconded by James. Any substantive corrections? Okay, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Ms. Wu.
Yes.
Mr. Evans.
Yes.
Ms. Hersey.
Yes.
Ms. Colasetti.
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry.
Yes.
Ms. Bishop.
Yes.
That motion passes. Are there any additions to the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to public participation. Does anyone wish to address the Cunningham Town Board? Please raise your hand. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to committee to verify bills.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So this last month in the town fund, we had $52,137.38. In expenditures in the general assistance fund, we had $73,328.66. Our total in expenditures was $125,466.04. We're basically at the same amount of participants in general assistance as we were last month. 10 of them are homeless. That number is way down from what it has been before, largely because many of our homeless participants are now housed thanks to our housing advocacy work. The emergency housing vouchers of Housing Authority, Pinewood Place, there's a number of reasons. So that's really to be celebrated. At one time, we had almost 40%, 35 to 40% of our participants were actively unsheltered. So this is great. We have a number of participants who have successfully completed 2 months at Salt and Light. They are eligible now to earn hours towards educational and training goals. We have our program set up to begin with the first of the year. And I've asked, once we have a couple of months under our belt, I will have the directors or the leads on that program come and present to the town board so you can see what that track looks like. Our disability and wellness track, we have 4 participants who have been awarded SSI since July. Last year, we had a record 16 participants awarded, largely due to advocacy efforts on the part of our staff. We do have 11 residents who have been helped to date with intensive SOAR case management in a little over a year. And you can kind of see the progress in the supervisor's memo. So essentially, what we are looking at, and I've had us track hours, is that a case can take between 40 and 100 hours of staff time. So they're extremely intensive. But it does mean that we receive those dollars back in terms of general assistance. And it's still the case that the reimbursements we're receiving from the Social Security Administration pay for that staff member. So not only is it revenue neutral, but we're able to have folks who are disabled move from $300 a month to over $800 a month in terms of their support, and they become eligible for vouchers that are specifically for disabled residents. With that, I'm happy to take any questions that you all have about the town bills.
Any questions? Doesn't appear to be any. Okay, would you like to go on?
I think we have to have a vote on the town bills. Is that correct? To approve them?
Yep. Oh, okay. We're ready to go. All right. Could we, is there a motion to approve the town bills? James?
I do have a quick question about one of the bills, or do you want to save that till we have a motion?
Let's get a motion to get the item on the floor and then we can discuss.
All right. I move approval of the town bills as presented.
I'll second.
I believe Chandra was first. So moved by James, seconded by Chandra. James?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. I was looking at the list, and under item area 670, unemployment compensation insurance. I wanted to make sure I wasn't misreading this, but it looked like the town board individuals that we were contributing to unemployment compensation insurance for that area. I wondered why that would be.
Looking for your names.
I see a thing for me for $7.30. It looks like it's under.
James, I see that, and
That's a mistake.
that's a mistake, but it is something that we've not paid the unemployment yet, and
Okay.
so that's something that we can fix.
Okay.
We
Yeah.
can fix before that particular unemployment wouldn't be due until January. So that's something that we can fix in QuickBooks, and we won't pay it for you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know we're not eligible. If the voters don't want us to come back, we don't get any
Yeah.
compensation for that.
Yeah, so we can't lay you off is the first part, but also elected officials do not pay unemployment compensation into the state, even for myself or Wayne. I don't believe we are covered by that. So thank you for catching that. We'll take care of it.
Any other questions or comments? Sharice?
Okay. I guess the only questions I really have is under utility expenses. And there's Village of Homer, Sangamon Valley Public Water District twice. And I just want to know what the Village of Homer or the Sangamon Valley Public Water District, what we're paying them for.
Yeah, so we have a utility assistance fund. It was actually seeded by the Unitarian Church. A number of faith-based organizations have given to it and a number of private individuals. And we continue to pay off within Champaign County using only private donations, utility expenses for people with actively shut off water or power, or an imminent shut off where LIHEAP is not able to move fast enough. So it's usually like it's happening that day. And so in every case we check. And so Sangamon County or Sangamon must be servicing one of the rural areas of Champaign County because we check jurisdiction when we pay that. But certainly this last month, I remember approving utility assistance to Muhammad, Muhammad, which is in the county. And there's been some calls from outside of Champaign Urbana to receive assistance for that. So we'll continue that fund. Basically, we'll continue to provide utility shut off or utility shut back on assistance throughout the county as long as those funds are given. And a criteria that the faith-based groups requested at the beginning is that we service the whole county, and we agreed to that because frankly, it's not an additional cost to the township. And it's a negligible staff time.
Is there a separate account set up for those, for that particular thing?
Correct. Yep. So the income either comes through the Angel Donor Fund or comes to the Utility Assistance Fund, which you'll see in the income. And then the expenses is specifically utility assistance. So it's separated out from our utilities for our property or for the office.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Quisenberry,
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin,
Yes.
Ms. Bishop,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Ms. Colacetti,
Yes.
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Evans.
Yes.
That motion passes. Reports of officers.
Yeah, so I'll just continue to point out a few highlights in the supervisor's memo, which is also available on our website if anyone would like to look at it from the public. So essentially, as you know, we are experiencing transmission rates of COVID-19 in Champaign County that are higher than any other time that we've had. They match or exceed November 2020, which was a similar kind of spike. We also are seeing it among school-age children. You know, there's certainly, it is safer to get COVID-19 right now because so many people are vaccinated and there's some antivirals. But for our participants who are oftentimes have medical fragility, it's a very serious issue. So we continue to campaign to help folks, incentivize folks to get vaccinated. We'll use that out of our other assistance line item that's already budgeted. And we are now going to be doing this week a call through to kind of catch the stragglers and see if we can help them get vaccinated, provide transportation if necessary. And then we do a $50 cash incentive once they show us their complete vaccination card with two shots. So I'm excited and proud about that. And hopefully, you know, it's a little bit every month that we're able to inch up those numbers. Rental assistance, Cunningham Township does receive most of our rental assistances for move-in assistance for those with who are homeless. The folks who are behind on rent have two options right now. One is through emergency rental assistance through Regional Plan Commission, and the other option is now through IDPH. So it's through IDHS, which is the state-based. So we help people apply to both places. They start with ERA, and if they've already received that or there's some issue, we can help them apply to IDHS. And if they're not helped there, then we can help them at Cunningham Township. So that continues to be an important service. We did 11 households, supported them with utility support. So that's coming down from 18 in October, about the same as we had in September. And so we continue to refer folks who are simply behind to LIHEAP and Salvation Army for support. The eviction tracking and prevention, I've heard from several town board members, you wanted to track this closely. And so we provide a grid each month that shows exactly the date we were in court, how many were first appearances, and the total cases that day. And I would like to, it's harder to figure out what the resolution was because eviction cases are sealed, but we're trying to work something out so that we can actually see of the actual cases, how many are being resolved. Mediation is active currently at the courthouse. We are approaching folks and helping them apply. Oftentimes that's for move-in assistance to move into a new place because the eviction, if it can't be handled in mediation, it usually is going to be completed. With housing advocacy and housewarming, this has really become a signature program of ours. We've helped 236 participants representing 142 households since the beginning of last fiscal year apply for subsidized housing. And 35%, and that's up from, each month we track it, but 35% of those who we've helped apply have actually successfully moved in. So that's amazing. Pinewood continues to be a really important option for participants with disabilities who are awaiting SSI determination. That's the new development in East Urbana. We've provided 10 referrals and the city of Champaign provided 14 referrals. So essentially there's that development should be close to full soon. I also know I spoke with IDA recently and they are interested in getting additional applications from our community for projects like this. So I would encourage, as we look at affordable housing opportunities, I think there are dollars available and it really is about, partnering with the Housing Authority to attach vouchers to new development. But I would encourage us to look at those. We've had 4 residents move in to date to Pinewood. That's 4 out of 10. Of course, we would like to see that go faster, but the emergency housing vouchers at the Housing Authority has really kind of overwhelmed their system. And so we expect to see additional move-ins with the first of the year. Let's see, we essentially are no longer referring people to the COVID housing vouchers for the homeless and very high-risk residents. So far, we've been told to kind of wait and pause on that as the Housing Authority processes the applications that they have, which may be the complete amount for the 163 that they have. We continue to provide housewarming support to furnish apartments with homeless residents. It's a very popular program and 22 homeless households have been assisted. This provides vouchers or credit at Habitat for Humanity and Salt and Light for folks to buy their housewares. And we also have a partnership with the Housing Authority to offer housewarming to their reentry participants. So we have had several folks access it that way as well. That's 100% angel donor funded. Our Bridge to Home Rapid Rehousing continues to chug along. Right now, it's specifically focused on rapid rehousing. We've served 5 households, and several have gotten employment after they received housing. So that's really important. We have 2 more referrals in process. And we've been working with the city to change our ESG grant. We've actually been investing in street outreach and emergency housing services with the anticipation of being reimbursed for that. I can give an update once we have the ink is signed with the state and whatnot. With emergency housing, we have helped to date since we started at the beginning of last fiscal year. So we're looking at about 18 months in. We've served 35 households. That includes 38 adults and 47 children. These are children who are in Urbana schools or staying overnight at Crisis Nursery. Last month, we served 4 households, and we had 1 household move into different housing and 1 household who is housed with the AHV voucher after 121 days. We are now providing internet access and laptops to everyone who goes through our emergency housing program. And we're working with the school district, and they're going to be furnishing the units with in-apartment computers. Our digital inclusion campaign has really expanded this semester. Partly that's because the federal government has increased its support for broadband access. So last month we held an event at the Common Ground Food Co-op. We could help connect 16 residents with Lifeline phones and expanded emergency broadband. That subsidized internet access at $50 a month. They are changing the emergency broadband program. We've been in a couple of webinars about those changes, and we're going to help people reconnect. So let's see. Last Bucket Brigade continues to chug along. We do about 12 households per week. We served 60 neighbors, with the majority of them being children this last month. Our winter coat giveaway is underway. We distributed over 100 coats, several hundred coats to over 100 people. We gave out 45 gift cards for meals at Mays. Those were actually donated by Mays. So they paid out of pocket for those gift cards. And then we paid for the meals to the attendees. We also had a vaccine clinic on location. We're still accepting donations of clean and gently used coats, hat, mittens, and gloves, and new socks. People can drop those off at 205 West Green Street, across from Urbana Free Library at Township. So there's a nice photo of our winter giveaway. And Solidarity Gardens, we're now going into our winter season. We've developed our affiliate program, and we're holding a mini retreat in January with our Solidarity Gardens leaders and community gardeners to plant 2022. And I think one of the areas that we really want to move into is distributing food on location at schools when parents pick up children at aftercare. So essentially, we want to bring fresh produce to where parents are already coming so that they can pick up that food as part of that, also picking up their kids. So we're working with CU Public Health and Sola Gracia and Solidarity Gardens to kind of link up those pieces of the train, so we can not only produce more vegetables next year, but we have a distribution network that really helps to get those vegetables to school-age children. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Mary Alice.
Danielle, thank you for all of your work and for your staff. I'm wondering if you have an update on when the Tableau dashboard would be available.
Which you cut out.
You had mentioned that you had an intern working on a Tableau dashboard so that we could see things in different cadences.
Yeah, so it's the dashboard has become an extremely complex draft document with a number of errors that need to be corrected. So basically, we're in the process of cleaning it up and making it public presentable. That in turn has two different roles, and one of those roles is housing advocacy, and they've been slammed with that work. That obviously is the more important. And then the second, their second priority is to clean up the data dashboard. So I was really hoping to have that for you this month. And I think, we're probably 2 months out to be showcasing that to you. But that basically what it does is the staff at Township update their numbers every single week. So they're reporting weekly through spreadsheets that have already been created on exactly their metrics. And the data dashboard is and those metrics are how I produce the supervisor's memo for you. The hope is that we could have a kind of a data dashboard that would be really, like regularly kind of real time up to date, that would also be linked off of the website. So I am hoping that we can get to that, but it is really a matter of how crazy rental assistance needs are. And if they could quiet down for a bit, we could finish the data dashboard project. So I don't have an ETA on that, but I'm hoping in the next few months, we'll be able to finish that project.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Grace?
Thank you. Thanks so much for the update and the report and the great work here. Especially love the digital inclusion and the laptops and broadband and helping people apply for SSI through that long, complicated process. And then with housing, appreciate all that great work. And I was wondering, what are some of the top barriers for the participants who aren't successfully moved into housing? Like if it's capacity or choice or housing options, but kind of what are the biggest barriers for the 35% that doesn't get successfully moved into housing?
Mhm. Yeah, it's actually 65%. The 35% have moved into housing. So I think that, and I presented to the town board and the county board on this, and maybe I sound a little bit like a broken record, but the statement, we don't take housing vouchers, or the unstated discrimination against people with housing vouchers is a big piece of that. We have landlords who are making people income qualify at the rate of the full rent and not the subsidized rent. So they're essentially, that's a way that it's discrimination against housing voucher holders by a different name. I'm not sure that's legal. I think that your HRO at the city level is actually looking into that right now. And there may be some ways to kind of call the landlords to task on that. There's implicit bias against African-American residents in our community. There's bias against families that have children because landlords are feeling very squirrely about the eviction ceiling law. And I 100% support the ceiling of eviction records. I think it's the right thing to do. We have seen landlords basically demanding credit at a higher rate than they have typically requested. So we have a lot of folks circulating with vouchers who are having a hard time finding housing in our community. So I would say that is the number one issue. The second issue is just capacity of housing authority to process applications. They're doing a great job, but it's a big job. And, the vouchers came down somewhat suddenly, and, they've been hustling, as we have, and our partners, to make sure that we get those distributed. I think there are some of the folks who are not housed are not actively homeless. And so essentially they don't qualify for the the vouchers that were just for homeless residents staying in shelter for 2 weeks, which was the first C-19 vouchers. So we do have folks who are doubled up with friends and family or precariously housed, and their eligibility we still are doing housing advocacy with them. They've requested support. We certainly prioritize them if there are vulnerabilities there, medical or domestic violence, or concerns about safety, having children. There are various vulnerabilities that kind of escalate those cases. But I would say those are the primary issues. Availability of affordable housing is a big one, especially people receiving SSI. If you are getting $800 a month from the federal government, then essentially your rent needs to not be over, say, $280 a month. Well, there's no place that you can get for $280 a month unless you're, doing the group house thing. So I think that another piece of the equation is we really need another. I don't think it's fashionable to call them SROs anymore, single resident occupancy. But I do think that's what we need affordable housing that's efficiency apartments for people with disabilities, or people on fixed incomes, retirement, or other kinds of things. So that is something that we should really be looking to grow opportunities for that kind of housing.
Any other questions? Chris?
Yeah, Fred Grosser, maybe you might want to chime in, but isn't discriminating against source of income against our human rights ordinance?
I can't
Yes.
give you an offhand opinion on that. I'd have to read it.
Yes, it is.
it's easy to look up the ordinance and it's very clear that it is against the law. in
Okay.
Urbana, but not in Champaign. It's not against the law in Champaign. It used to be, and then they changed the language to exempt voucher holders from source of payment.
Is our Carla Boyd putting out a cease and desist letter to
She's at-
landlords?
She's actively working, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you, Diane.
Yeah, Carla has met with Kyle, who's our staff member involved with eviction prevention and discrimination. And we continue to work with the city of Urbana. We want to take on this issue where it becomes visible. And there's certainly examples that we have forwarded of overt discrimination. And then it's a little harder to catch the non-overt discrimination. And as I presented several years ago, I really think that once we get through the overt discrimination, testing, I think, would be in order as a way to basically eradicate that practice in the community.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Danielle. Wayne, did you have a report?
No.
Okay. Is there any unfinished business? I don't believe there is. New business, we have an audit presentation. Is there someone who needs to be promoted to a panelist for the audit?
Yeah, so I'll be presenting on the audit this evening. We don't have our auditor present.
Okay,
So, and I will be very brief. We had a remarkably clean audit. There were no findings whatsoever, as you can see in the management letter. Thanks to our new accounting and operations manager, the process was extremely smooth. We ended the year with a new significant asset, our property, and a healthy net position of 2.7 million. You can see a set aside for the potential property tax liability of $122,000. Essentially, we are in really good shape. We have assets that are valuable that will continue to appraise and increase in value. And we have a nest egg that does not exceed the state's cap on savings, but is healthy and allows us to address any liabilities that come in the future, possibly leverage up new programs, those kind of things. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about the audit. It will be on file it is on file for the public to see. It's been posted to the News Gazette that it's on file. It's both at the clerk's office and at our office, and it's online if anyone would like to see it.
any questions? James?
Yeah, my only question is about the note on the note number 1 on the financial statements with regard to modified cash accounting. And it would help if you could explain why we use that and why our auditors are a little bit cautious about saying anything about it.
Yep. So each year you'll see this note. And essentially, I had a long conversation with CLA, our last auditor, about whether we should convert. So there's cash basis, there's modified cash basis, and there's accrual basis. Accrual basis basically means that you put dollars and cents, you put expenditures and income in the year that they're anticipated. And on a cash basis, you put it in the year that it actually hits the bank account. So with a modified cash basis is that, but there's some modifications around liabilities at the end of the year. And I will ask Wayne or look to Wayne if there's further details that could be offered to the modified cash basis. When I spoke with Hope, who's a principal at CLA, we had a extensive conversation because we inherited this accounting process from the past administration. So this is not anything new to Township. It is generally recognized that, working on on an accrual basis may be simpler, but it would require a pretty significant change in our processes. And at the time that Hope and I spoke about it, she really felt that it was not substantive or useful, that it would mean that there's a note put in each audit that we're on a modified cash basis. But she said, the amount of pain to change your books is probably not worth it, given, the transparency of your books, the size of Township and whatnot. So at this point, unless I hear otherwise, the thought is that we would continue to do what has happened, to account for monies in the same ways that the Township has for quite a while, which is the modified cash basis.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll move on to the first action item, which is ordinance number T 2021-12-003, an ordinance levying taxes for all town purposes for the town of Cunningham, Champaign County, Illinois for the tax year 2021, collectible in 2022.
Do you want to get a motion on the table, or would you like me to?
Is there a
couple of words?
Do you want to present this, and then we'll get a motion on the
Yeah,
table?
so essentially every year we set our tax levy, and honestly, to be 100% transparent, we could say that we're levying, $100 million, and we will always be capped at what is allowed under tax caps. So in some ways, what matters is if we were to levy less than what tax caps provides. In this case, we are levying essentially to the maximum, which is a very marginal difference from year to year. Essentially what we want to do is to make sure that we request a levy, or we declare a levy amount that anticipates new growth and potentially portions of the hospitals or other properties where there is contestation about property taxes, that if they were to be put back on the tax rolls, that we would be able to recoup those tax costs. So it's actually really important that we levy, we put a request in that is over the amount that we're anticipating, so that we can capture any new growth or those new properties or new value that's put on the tax rolls. But otherwise, I would say, because we are under tax caps as Township, this exercise is somewhat performative because we will be capped at what we are capped at.
Okay, can we get a motion on the floor?
Sure.
Mary Alice?
Yeah, I was going to ask a question, but I will first make the motion. So I move approval of ordinance number T 2021-12-003, an ordinance levying taxes for all town purposes for the town of Cunningham, Champaign County, Illinois, for the tax year 2021, collectible as in 2022.
Is there a second?
Okay. Sorry.
Grace?
Yeah.
Okay, moved by Mary Alice, seconded by Grace. Okay, questions, Mary Alice?
Yeah, so since we're kind of guessing an overall amount that we're going to have, and we also have in section 2, we have the amount that's levied for each of the areas. Does that proportionally get decreased based on how does that difference between what we're actually able to levy and what's in here be accounted for in section 2?
Yeah, so what happens is we'll get a proposed extension back where the clerk basically puts a kind of percentage amount in either fund, right? So if it's knocked down by, say, 15%, it would be 15% in each fund. At that time, I, as supervisor, have the ability to actually set the fund amounts differently at a different ratio. I do that in consultation with Wayne, and it's at a time in the year when we're already building our budget for next year. So it's much more informed by next year's budget than this tax levy is here. So essentially that's what the process looks like. And we do have an opportunity to rebalance those funds. The only meaning in that is, the town board fund is more permissive. The general assistance fund is more restrictive. The general assistance fund is not really under the purview of the town board. The town fund is. And basically I look at what our general assistance and assistance programs generally, what it's looking like for that year. and what the trends are, and then I make, in the budget process, make the best possible guess to what the assistance levels will be and what budget we'll need.
Grace.
So, Mary Alice, just so you know, we levied the same amount last year, the 2.3 million. What was actually extended was $1,825,177.95. That was further adjusted by certificates of error that can adjust what we actually get up or down. I estimate if the hospitals don't come on, that we'll get approximately 25,000 more. That assumes no growth, though we will have some growth, but we're going to be capped at our at what the referendum was approved at, which is 0.3015. Now there is kind of an asterisk to that statement because of new legislation that passed last year, and we're still trying to figure out how that impacts us. So there could be an additional $16,000, but I've been working with the clerk's office and the treasurer's office to figure out how that new legislation impacts us.
Thank you, Winton.
Grace, did you have a question?
Yes, I think Wayne was already maybe answered it, but if you just could repeat, clarify, because my question was what sets that cap for the township, and if this had to do with that vote, and that's the referendum you're talking about, and that's what sets the cap for the township. Is that
right? So yeah, so normally the cap is, and it's not a cap on a rate, it's a cap on a levy, and normally that levy cap is set by CPI, which was 1.4%, according to the Department of Revenue. Next year, it'll probably be a lot higher. It could be upwards of 6%, but the PTEL statute only allows us, it only cap CPI, the CPI increase to 5% for us since we're non-home rule. So that it's PTEL that limits us. However, because of the referendum, we're actually allowed to go above that to a rate of 0.3015 per $100 of assessed value.
because the referendum is for the rate, right?
Right. The way it was written, it was for a rate.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay. We have a motion by Mary Alice, second by Grace. Could the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Evans,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Ms. Colacetti,
Yes.
Ms. Bishop,
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry,
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin.
Yes.
Motion passes. Next item is Resolution T 2021-12-019R, which is a resolution authorizing the Township Supervisor to execute a lease agreement with the new Lincoln Square LLC for use of space for the Township Assessor.
So this resolution is to extend the lease for the Township Assessor's Office. I emailed you kind of the highlights of it, which I'm sorry I don't have up, but if you give me a moment. But basically we're renewing through the end of 2022. We are the rent is staying the same because we are getting kind of a discount off of the rent. We're paying it all up front, the 10,000 and give me a moment. $10,200. This lease does not have a tenant option like we did this year, so we're gonna have to renegotiate. But I talked to the landlord, and he's committed to renegotiating. So we'll have the number for the new year, for the new lease for the calendar year 2023 in time so we can put it in our budget for fiscal year 23.
Any questions for Wayne? The actual copy of the lease was emailed to the town board on Friday. Is that correct?
Yes.
Mary Alice?
So I noticed that there's a cap on if you use more than a certain amount of utilities, right?
Right. So basically, we get a credit for the first $50 in utilities. After the first $50 for any particular month, the township would have to pay. This year, we've not exceeded that cap.
Okay, that was my question.
Though, December isn't up yet. I can just tell you that, part of it is just COVID and people working remotely, but also the fact that we're in an enclosed space. We really don't use the heat or air conditioning that much because, we just kind of share the air from the rest of the mall. That's not to say we don't use it, but we don't use it that much.
James?
Yeah, Wayne, thanks for sending me the square footage. This is a pretty good deal at under $12 a square foot for office space. And I was curious, I assume they take care of garbage service for you. That's not a thing we have to worry about.
So we do have someone come in and clean once a week. The office, they do mostly disinfecting, but we take out the garbage if it gets full, but there are garbage bins that we can put our refuge in.
Yeah, they provide a dumpster for you guys to.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Oh, just add, and it's also offered to the supervisor's office that we have like a jump seat at the assessor's office, because there are times when there's just too much chaos in our office. And so there's a quiet place at Lincoln Square that we can go to. So anyway, we appreciate that.
Okay, could we get a motion for approval?
I move
James.
approval of the lease.
Move. It's second?
Second.
Is that Jaya?
Yeah.
Okay, moved by James, seconded by Jaya. Any further discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry,
Yes.
Ms. Colacetti,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin,
Yes.
Ms. Bishop, Mr. Evans,
Yes.
That motion passes. Last item on the agenda is approval of the town board meeting schedule for it's like calendar year 2022. Is there a motion for approval?
Move to approve Township Board meeting schedule for 2022.
Moved by Chandra, second.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mary Alice. Any discussion? Chandra?
Just wondered why the meetings are scheduled for 6:30 and not 6.
Tradition?
Because as we see now, if the meetings start at 6, we could possibly get to council closer to 7 rather than 6:30. That's just my observation and my suggestion.
Just from the supervisor's perspective, we'd be happy to meet at the time that's convenient for town board members. So
Grace?
That was going to be my question, because it says there's only one with an asterisk. That is the asterisk meaning that it starts at 6:30. Does that mean that all the rest start at 6 except for that one in January? So my question is, are they starting at 6 or 6:30? Because I'm kind of reading it that they start at 6 except the one in January that starts at 6:30. Is that not right?
Well, they've typically started at 6:30. I don't know what the asterisk is for.
Well, like the second page, the asterisk, it looks like says the township starts at 6:30. And then only the one in January has an asterisk and the rest don't.
Oh, I see. No, they've typically started at 6:30. If you wanted to amend this schedule to have them all start at 6, we could do that.
I guess I'm confused still on how it is written now. That is written now with kind of the understanding that they're all starting at 6:30.
Danielle, do you know what the schedule means?
Let's see. So essentially, if you look at the very bottom, it says township starts at 6:30 and city council cow starts at 7. This was prepared by the clerk. I asked the clerk to basically sync up the township meetings, the town board meetings with the city council meetings. So they put this together. But basically, my understanding is that township would start at 6:30, city council and the cow would start at 7. Township has grown a lot in 4 years. So our reports, when I was on town board, it was a 10-minute conversation and the town board just verified the bills of general assistance and that was it. But we are doing a lot more now. So our conversations go longer. So I would, defer to the will of the town board for whatever you would think is convenient to you.
Mary Alice?
I actually would prefer to keep it at 6:30. I mean, right now, we're all meeting via Zoom. I would hope that in the next year that we're going to be back in person. And in that case, several of us work jobs and don't get home in time to eat. So that's why I like the 6:30 time slot, because it gives us an opportunity to have food before we come in.
Well, we have a motion on the floor for the schedule as written, which has the town board's meeting starting at 6:30.
I have just a quick question. I know I'm not going to vote on this, but are you guys looking at a resolution? Because if you are, I did not get this.
It's the last page of the meeting packet. There's no resolution. It's a schedule.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, correct me if I'm wrong, Fred, but the town board can make motions, resolutions, and ordinances. And if you don't have a resolution, I understand that it would just be a motion to approve the agenda, the town board schedule as printed or with amendments.
Grace?
Thanks. I just didn't know if like 6:15 was a reasonable compromise or that's too weird to not start on a half hour.
I think that would be confusing to the public. So we have a motion on the floor for 6:30. Unless there's an amendment to change that, that's what we'll vote on.
I will make the amendment to have the town board meeting start at 6 p.m. instead of 6:30.
Is there a second to that?
Second.
Okay, so there's a motion to change this to 6 p.m., seconded by Grace. Do we vote on this amended motion first and then the original, Fred? James?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So we'll need a roll call vote.
Actually, we need a vote on the amendment.
That's
Correct.
what we're talking about.
That's what I'm talking about.
We can vote on the amendment and then you'll vote on the motion, whether it's been amended or not.
Okay, so the amendment is for a start time of 6 p.m. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
No,
was that a no? Is that what you said?
I said
I
a
didn't-
no. Yep,
Okay,
I said a no.
okay. Mr. Evans,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
No.
Ms. Colacetti,
Yes.
Ms. Bishop,
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin,
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry,
Yes.
That motion passes. So this has been amended to have a start time of 6 p.m. Now we'll vote on the motion itself.
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Evans,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
yes,
Ms. Colacetti,
Yes.
Ms. Bishop,
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin,
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry.
yes,
That motion passes. So we will amend the schedule for the meeting times to start at 6 p.m. for town board. With no further business before the town board, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you. All right, as soon as you're ready, we'll begin the city council meeting.
Okay. Ms. Wu,
Here.
Mr. Evans,
Here.
Ms. Hersey,
here,
Ms. Colacetti,
Here.
Ms. Bishop,
Here.
Ms. Wilkin,
Here.
Mr. Quisenberry,
here,
Mayor Marlin.
Here. Next item is approval of minutes of the previous meetings of November 22nd, 2021, and the city council goal setting session from December 2nd and 3rd, 2021. Is there a motion for approval?
I move approval of the November 22nd, 2021 meeting and the city council goal setting sessions, December 2nd and 3rd, 2021.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Moved by James, seconded by Jaya. Are there any substantive corrections? Okay, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry,
Yes,
Mr. Evans,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
yes,
Ms. Bishop,
Yes.
I've lost my step. Okay, Ms. Wilkin.
Yes.
Okay, and Ms. Bishop, I think I called you already.
Yes.
All righty.
That motion passes.
Yeah,
That's everybody, Phyllis?
yeah, I think so.
Okay. Okay. I don't believe there are any additions to the agenda. We'll move on to presentations and public input. The first is a presentation on empowering the community to combat community violence by First Followers. And this was a request from council members Wilkin and Bishop. Would you like to introduce this? And is there anyone we need to promote to be a panelist?
Yes, and yes, thank you. We have Karen here for our scheduled second presentation. We need Regina Parnell as a panelist. I emailed Borme, Dr. Regina Parnell.
Okay. Any other panelists?
I think that's all as far as I know. They can chime in if they need someone else.
Okay.
And this is in light of some of our strategic planning and other motivations for partnering with community organizations to talk about community safety and addressing community violence issues. And so I was thinking this is an opportunity to learn about these two great community organizations here, what they're doing and what some of their needs or possibilities for partnering might be. My goal is just to lay out some ideas on the table in an effort to increase that community safety. And I hope that community and council members could also feel inclined to bring ideas and presentations, and that we can continue these kinds of conversations and getting these ideas going. And so we had scheduled first for First Followers to go first with Regina, and then CU Trauma and Resiliency Initiative. Does that still work for you guys? Okay, great. Then I think we can let Dr. Regina Parnell take it away.
Great. And you'll have 10 minutes, please.
Okay, thank you. First, I would like to thank the mayor for this opportunity to come before the board to speak. Grace, thank you for inviting us to come and talk about what we're doing within the community. I would like to share my screen, so hopefully. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. H3, what we're trying to provide is healing to help those that have been harmed and impact, to give our community hope. I am Dr. Regina Parnell, and I would be remiss if I did not give acknowledgement to the late, great Janice Mitchell, who I have worked behind and beside for the last 26 years in the Urbana area, because that's where I am housed. And that's where I've been since I moved to the community. Ms. Mitchell has done great work within the community. Her presence will be missed. So I give all praises to her at this moment. What we're talking about is trauma. And I'm sure everybody knows what trauma is. It's an emotional response to a terrible event. It leaves people with shock and denial, typically. It's long-term, short-term impact on everyone that has encountered some type of trauma. We've all had the trauma-informed training, and we usually go off a checklist. The common emotional and behavioral response to trauma, the common response to physical, what it looks when we're physical, responsive to trauma, and the emotional piece of it. What we don't talk about is that trauma is not a one-size-fits-all. We cannot look at a person and say that person has been impacted by trauma. To be honest, Champaign, Urbana has been impacted by trauma. Every child within the community, because of the shooting and the community violence, has been impacted by trauma. Those preschool to high school to the elderly, our entire community is being traumatized. So what we're focusing on, First Followers, we're using a social ecological theory, and it is a domino effect. When the individual is traumatized, then the relationships that they have with others are often traumatized, which leads into the community, which leads into a broader set of standpoint. But what we want to do is scale that back. We want to focus on individuals. We want to focus on those males 17 to 24. We want to provide them with an assessment with trained social workers, similar to what DCFS does when they do background histories on families. We want to sit with them for 2 to 3 hours to gain an understanding of who these young men are, where their background is from, what type of medical history they may have had, what type of trauma they may have had in their childhood to the point they are that 17, 24 age range. Once we have that assessment by trained licensed social workers, we're going to do what they call wraparound services. And that's an evidence-based practice that we will provide them. We would sit with them, pull all the community members with them that they feel is a support system for them, and build that foundation for them to connect them to the counseling, the hobbies that they may have, and those individuals that have supported them throughout their lifetimes. From that point, we're going to do peer training. It's a program called Young Voices with Actions in St. Louis. And what they're doing is going through a civil program with these young men. It's a 12-week program. It's providing them with civil engagement. It's making them leaders within themselves, and it's making them peer mentors for those that's coming behind them. And once they complete the Young Voices with Action curriculum, then we're going to do a workforce development. I'm sure some of you have seen the houses that the young men in our program are building. We want to give them a skill for a lifetime, something that they can do that nobody else can take from them, and try to balance them in a way that they can go forth to make a difference, not only within their community, but within the Champaign, Urbana as a whole area. And that is what we're proposing to do with males 17 to 24 that's actively engaging in some of the gun violence and community violence within our community. And if there's any questions. I see your mouth moving, Mayor, but I don't hear you.
Happens a lot. Are there any questions for Dr. Parnell?
Yes, ma'am.
Chandra?
Thank you. First, could you unshare your screen? Sorry, I like to see people when I talk. Thank you.
You like to see my smile?
Exactly. Is this a program that's already going?
Yes, ma'am. There's some components that we will be adding if we're funded, but the workforce development and some of the civil engagement we are doing, but not to a 12-week program, but we want to add that to it, as well as do that background assessment with the young men, just to gain an understanding of who they are as a whole. Because what we're doing is just most people are doing is just getting their names, their basic information and pushing them forward and not understanding who they are. And so that's what we want to do. And with that assessment, after they complete that assessment, because it will bring up some trauma, we're connecting them for 6 weeks with a licensed social worker to help them process what they've been through. And then we'll move them to the next step.
And how are the young men doing that are in the program you have set up now?
They're doing fabulous. They are working, what they're doing is gutting out some of the houses that we have contracts with, and they're remodeling those houses. We have one on Louisiana that they fully built. I can't think of the other street offhand, but they are doing great. We have them, when they're not working hands-on, we have them in the classroom, providing that social and emotional support to them. We have those community conversations with them also. So we're teaching them about how to respond, how to communicate, how to process, what does mental health look like, what does trauma look like. And these are the, we're not going in depth, but we are touching the surface with them now. Yes, ma'am.
Jaya, and then Sharice.
Can you talk a little bit about the Youth Voices with Action program, why this particular program was selected? I know you mentioned something about kind of using an evidence-based approach. So I'd like to know a little bit more about what was the selection process for what you're proposing.
Well, I'm not sure if you guys know, but St. Louis is having a high rate rise in community violence also. And so this program, they are connecting young people that are have been impacted or involved in the community violence within this program, and they are having success. What they're doing is called Protecting My Block. So they're building these young people and sending them back into their communities as leaders of their neighborhoods to recruit other young people to come in and be a part of the program. So it's almost like each one teach one program that they're using, and it's an evidence-based program.
Thank you. Sharice.
Thank you for doing this.
Yes, ma'am.
This is sounds like a good start. Are these children receiving any kind of therapy?
And once we do the background assessment, Ms. Sharice, then we will connect them to a licensed clinical social worker for 6 weeks.
Does the social worker have, do they do psychological services or anything?
Yeah, they're clinical social workers. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And my other question is, because my thing is also solving crime that is already taken place, and that which also makes a kind of a perpetual trauma. So is this program at all going to help solve any of the crime that's taken place within Urbana?
I think it's going to take a collective number of programs to help solve, but what we're doing will help some of the young men that's within the program. So, it's not as I said, it's not a one fit all, but the young men that have been through our program has been successful while they're with us. And what we're trying to do is to give them more services to help them understand what they're encountering. Because I said, we are all traumatized by the things that's going on within our community. And if, as adults, if we're having a hard time grasping it, think about a child 17 or 24 that don't have those tools to even understand. And that's what we're trying to provide them, those tools, not only those physical tools, but those emotional tools as well.
Okay, Mary Alice and then Grace.
Thank you, Dr. Is it Dr. Parnell? Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So you said that you have some of this program ongoing. How long has your program been active?
We have had GOMAD since 2016, and it's Go Make a Difference in Your Community is what it stands for.
All right. And so you also mentioned that you've had people finish your program. So roughly how many graduates have you had?
Ms. Wu, I do not want to give you that number because I don't know offhand.
Okay.
But we have had some successful. We've had some to go and find solid employment. We've had some to go to roofing. We've had a couple to do CDL license. We've had some to enroll in community college. We've had some to work regular jobs, car, hospital, craft, the U.S. Post Office. So we are connecting them because we give them that resume building also and communicate and interview skills.
It would be great if you could send us the number of graduates you have when you have those numbers, and maybe
Yes, ma'am.
include the number of people in Urbana would be wonderful.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
We actually have one that's currently in our group from Urbana. That's the current one. And he has been in the program for 1.5 years and he's doing wonderful. So yes, we do have Urbana.
Grace, you had a question?
Yes, question, and I'll try and slide in a quick comment that I helped with some of the GOMAD stuff a few years ago in their early stage with like gardening and sustainability and nerdy stuff like that. And I will just say that what I saw is the big difference that it makes having those personal relationships and trust. And that's what I see as a big difference versus some other programs that I've been a part of. And I think really meeting these young people where they are and building those personal relationships and trust makes a huge difference that I've seen first followers do like nobody else that I've been involved with. So I think that really makes a big difference. And yeah, anyway. And so, yeah, my question was, what are some of the biggest needs to expand the program? I think you mentioned funding. Is that?
Funding is definitely one that we need, especially with the stipends to give the young people. And that's the problem. Most of our funding come from WIOLA, and they can only be in a program for so long within WIOLA, and then they age out or they overextend the hours that WIOLA offers. Funding for the social work services, funding just to provide the support and services that they need. We have them most days 6 to 7 hours a day, and we cannot afford to pay them from funding that we have because it would empty our funding. But we need funding to help support the young men, to give them that stipend to help them help their families. And when you are earning, you're feeling good about yourself, and that's that self-pride that we're trying to build into them, that they're coming out doing something positive and they can see it within the house, and then they're earning something to help themselves and their families.
Thank you.
Okay. I think we have time for one more question. Any further questions? Okay, well, thank you so much, Dr. Parnell.
Thank
for
you.
being here and
Thank
for
you.
presenting.
Thank you.
And we'll move on to the CU Trauma and Resiliency Initiative. Who's going to introduce this?
I think just for the same kind of general introduction, getting groups on the table, hearing what they're doing and what some of their needs might be. And so we have Karen Sims from CU Trauma and Resiliency Initiative, and very excited to hear from her. So thank you for coming.
Hi, so thank you so much for the offer and invitation, and let me echo many of the things that Regina said. First Followers is doing amazing work, and this is a collaborative effort, and deeply respectful for Janice Mitchell's work in this community. So I get a chance to talk a little bit about some of the current work that is done to support survivors in our community who've been impacted by gun violence. This work has had many different shapes over the past 4 years. In the past year and a half, it has been completely volunteer driven and unsupported by sort of formal funding sources. But I want to share a little bit about what we've been doing and the infrastructure we've built through the Community Violence Task Force. So that you can see kind of how we've been providing support. So I don't know if everybody is aware, but there's a community violence task force that is coordinated through the Champaign County Community Coalition. So that group has been meeting for about 3 years, and it is a place where different constituent groups who are doing work to address community violence come together, and this work around survivor support has come out of that effort. And so you'll see many different people come to the meetings or are involved with us to help out. And so again, I can't stress enough that this work has been supported in large part by the community. A couple of years ago, we were asked, sort of charged as a part of that task force, to come up with a centralized plan for survivors. And I will say, in complete transparency, we have never been able to sort of meet the demands. So as the number of survivors continue to increase, we sort of maybe provide support for a third, a fourth of all of the survivors who've been impacted by gun violence. But what we have created in conversations with Carle Hospital, schools, local providers is that families come in through sort of a centralized place. And CU Tri is one of those places where we get a lot of those referrals that come in to the community. And so anybody can call. About a third of our referrals come from Carle. Another third of our referrals come from just, moms, dads, people who've used our supports. And then the other third of our referrals come from schools. Anybody who is impacted by gun violence. And so we don't have like a victim and offender continuum. It really can be anybody who's impacted by gun violence that's self-defined, can utilize us. And as Regina talked, and so I hate this word around assessment, but really what it means is we listen deeply to needs, try to figure out where we can make a difference, try to make a meaningful difference, and sort of stabilizing families. A lot of times what we're called to do is some basic crisis support around housing or physical care, or sometimes emotional care. And so just to know that that happens. This does not show up well, but I know I sent the handout in advance, but this kind of gives you a sense of the flow. And for about maybe a third of the people that we get referrals for, as Regina mentioned, we provide coordinated, collaborative, intensive team building support. We provide something called wraparound, but a number of the people who we provide support to, we just basically link to care, but we stay with them. We provide about 16 weeks more or less of support. Again, we're using volunteers, and sometimes we get a little bit of funding that allows us to provide a stipend that allows for a facilitator to really kind of work with a family, particularly if they're complicated needs. And I would be remiss if I didn't give mad shout outs to Bend the Arc, Moms Demand Action, many community groups who have, again, donated, contributed time, talent, and energy. A lot of times when we get connected to families, particularly families who are impacted by gun violence, they're unsafe at home. And so we try to give them a comfort and care basket. We try to make sure that some of those basic needs we've covered, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the services. So this year, we've had 47 referrals from April of 2001 to date. So that's just this year, and I have last year's numbers, and that's about 63 different individuals. And so in August of this year, because of the intensity of the referrals this summer, we got like 35 referrals all at once, and it was a little bit overwhelming. The coalition set a meeting, and we sat down and met with the Youth and Family Peer Support Alliance, and they have agreed to sort of help us with and take the lead in providing support for families with children, and so that they're sort of the primary lead for those. We still kind of help with the intake and the assessment process and the wraparound process, but they do the parent support, the parent building, the skill building, the recovery, all of those things. And so that's what we've been doing. So some of the things that we do, big issues is we provide temporary housing. It is one of our biggest needs, and in our community is many families who are impacted by gun violence can't go home or don't feel safe at home, and getting a stable placement is very difficult. So thanks to the Township office and RPC, and again, many community partners, but also sometimes donors, we place people in hotels and other sort of short-term housing in a way to get them into more longer-term housing support. So that's a big need. We also do healthcare advocacy. So we work a lot with the social workers at Carl and local providers, because when we're working with gunshot survivors, sometimes they have wounds, and so or can't return to work or need help navigating different systems. We've had a number of people who have been, I don't know if you know, right? Like there have been folks who maybe have had long-term hospital stays and hospital placements, and have had family coming in from out of town and needed support for that. So we try to help with all of those things. When needed, we connect people to formal and informal mental health services. I don't know if people know, but we have a mental health support network called Here For You, and those aren't formal necessarily providers. We use an evidence-based practice model called psychological first aid and skills for psychological recovery that deals with a lot of the basic mental health needs that actually stabilizes folks so that it actually reduces the need for long-term treatment. And we have a network of providers and people who are trained. We actually are finishing training 8 new people right now. We do a lot of referrals to lots of different stuff, and everything from sort of mental health support, like peer-based supports like GROW, to longer and more complicated sort of substance abuse services. And so like all of this is super formal, but I will tell you sort of a de-identified story as agnostic as possible, because it's a small town, and it's hard to sort of share publicly about people without them seeing themselves in the story. But sort of the most generic story is, a mom will be impacted by gun violence, and she will not feel safe at home. And so, it's sort of making sure mom and kiddos are all it's working with the schools to be sure that transportation is in place. Sometimes we pull together all of the schools, sort of mental health providers and social work providers, to build a village around so that everybody has the seamless network of care. We've been really fortunate that where needs exist across the community, social workers have teamed together to offer group-based supports, and to make sure that not only does that one set of youth get support, but their entire network has been supported. And then we try to make folks' lives better. So, so we always are prioritizing social connectedness, helping people be better. So we connect to, we have a couple of employment services who help our moms and families get back on their feet if they've had housing, they've had employment losses and stabilization. And a year, although many families are experiencing one of the most impactful crises ever, many of them are different, right? So that they might have free park services. So Urbana Parks has been phenomenal as a partner. So they'll give recreation and play, and we'll get books, and we'll do. And so we really try to help promote healing and resiliency and recovery in a real robust way, not just symptom reduction. And that has been the critique is that we can't necessarily serve everybody because we're really trying to provide healing and not just sort of Band-Aids approach. So that is what we do. So I talked about our network. We call it Support for You. Everything is free and confidential. Law enforcement have this, schools have it, public health has it. So we get this information out and about. So what we need, I'm going to be pretty quick. Always, I mentioned this has all been volunteer based. And so when people have critiques, we hear you, but know that we are one volunteer at a time. We're all doing this over above other sort of requirements. As always, and you'll hear this every different place, we need to improve our collaboration and our coordination. We always need more volunteers in so many different ways. We definitely, one of the critiques that we've been hearing is we need much more intensive substance abuse services, and we need more trauma specific strategies to help people with more complex issues like post-traumatic stress disorder and complex trauma. And we're working with the city of Champaign to do that. I know that there's a Brews, Blues, and News event tonight talking about this, but we need far more. One of the things that we hear all the time is we need far more pro-social skill building activities. A lot of times the activities just serve sort of folks who've been identified as high need. But if you can think about a family, if you invest all of your time, talent, and energy to one set of kids and you don't take care of the whole village, then other kids sort of show up as having needs. And so we need a lot more access of things that are community-based and local. Housing, we scream about every single meeting. Probably people are tired of hearing me scream about that, but we have a fantasy that one day we would have a short-term, safe, secure, private, longer-term, 45 days plus stable housing for families who've been dislocated because of housing. And it can't be something that is not healing. So it can't be like we're putting people and again, I get crisis emergency housing services, but when you think about a family or a couple who's been dislocated by gun violence, putting them in a classical shelter is actually going to be another trauma. They actually need a stable place to recover, heal, where services push in, where wraparound services are there, where really if they have physical issues or emotional issues, they can get really the care that they need. Always vocational opportunities. We love first followers for all that they do and how wonderful it is. Last but not least, and I know everybody feels this, but we need constantly people to hope that things can get better. Thoughts are incredibly creative. And if we sort of believe that this is hopeless and helpless and it won't get better, and we give energy to focusing on the problem, not believing that we're a part of the solution, we feed into that feeling of hopelessness and despair. So that is sort of our little soapbox, but we've been chugging along over here, trying our best, not perfectly, but trying to do better.
You do tremendous work. Could you, both speakers, could you share your presentations, and we could get that incorporated into the meeting record, the PowerPoints. And are there any questions for Ms. Sims? Sharice.
Hi, Ms. Sims. I guess a question that I have for you is, do you have services for, let's say, the person that has been directly impacted by gun violence, meaning they got shot and had to spend so much time in the hospital or recovering that they could have possibly lost their, especially now with COVID, been laid off from their job and are in danger of losing their home. What kind of services would you have for that type of person?
So yes, Ms. Sharice, thank you for asking. So again, a third of our referrals come from Carl, and most of those come from occupational health. So it's been gunshot survivors. And so we, again, work in partnership. We use that wraparound model. So we'll have a social worker and we'll look at every single life domain. So physical, vocational, emotional, or whatever. And if there is, so we'll help you sort out what kind of work makes sense for you. We'll help you navigate if you had a job and you don't know how to navigate and ask for time off. We'll help with those advocacy skills. If there are supports that we can put in place, if there are transportation barriers, because maybe you were driving and you need some additional help, we'll help you understand how to work with MTD and disability service so that those kinds of supports can push in. We try to think about your whole village. So if you have a partner that you're involved with, we're trying to think about what works well for your partner or your mom or your extended network. So we take that whole village and make sure, again, it's crisis nursery support. It's working with childcare resources. It's everything that we can think about. And thanks to the Bridgewater Sullivan grant that they have to provide housing support for people who've been impacted by COVID. So we've been also able to stabilize housing issues for people who kind of need that bridge. We will work with anybody. We work with all the townships, with everybody to stabilize that housing, to look for that employment, to help make sure that you also get all of the wound care, wellness care, all of those things are in place, because many people don't know how to advocate for home-based care, how to get a parent as the care provider or a partner. So we're thinking about that whole 360.
Okay, I guess another question I have is your program, do you work with people that are single, like they don't have anybody, and older than 16, people that are older that have also been impacted in that way?
So yes, actually most of the people that we work with are older than 16. We actually don't, right, like most of the people, right, because most of the time we're working in a village. So we'll work with caregivers and folks, but then we'll work with young adults and adults. We haven't had a lot of referrals that are just sort of completely disconnected to anybody in the community. Most of the time there's someone in the village, either here or in Chicago or Indianapolis or Bloomington or Danville. And so we try to reconnect you to your village. And then we have something called our Wisdom Leader program. So when we work and when we encounter folks who are maybe a little bit older or grandparents who need some, what we call it, peer support, because they're feeling stressed out or like unsafe or whatever, we have our wisdom leaders who are available to talk, be that listening ear, to sort of provide some of that just emotional support. Again, using that psychological first aid and skills for psychological recovery. Our wisdom leaders are available for our more, mature folks who are not leaving their homes. We've worked with a lot with Silver Hearts with Giovanna, and have done some work with her on doing surveys and talking to seniors in Urbana, just really listening well. And what they told us was, we're feeling alone and isolated and disconnected. And so our wisdom leaders have really made a commitment to be those listening ears, but also link people to like care and resources and promote social connectedness. So right, however they can do that. So we partner with everybody.
Okay, so the one-off that let me, a person that has moved here and their family, and I say this because I lived in California for 30 years, and I had my blood relatives that lived there actually moved almost as soon as I had moved out there. I only had a couple, but I basically had no support. If something tragic had happened to me, there was nobody there that would have been able to really help me. Mm-hmm. So I guess my question is, if and I know that there are people here that live in Urbana, folks that moved here for a job training or or their students or whatever, and they're totally disconnected in the sense that they have no family support, they have nobody here, and if something traumatic were to happen to them, if they would be able in using your services, or if you have things set up, if you have something set up for that particular type of situation.
So, that's part of the fantasy when we have full capacity. So, right, we have a little bit of help to do that, to do some of our senior support, but definitely not enough. I have people who want to do that kind of work. And I will also say, if you've ever been to one of our community violence or neighborhood safety meetings, we always have information about where resources are, where to go, where to be involved in. We have always probably a plethora of reach out to family services. This is where senior services, and we're really trying to deepen those kind of messages more. So we're always stuffing stuff into a bag or giving things in a hand so that if we can get you to come out, and then when we are getting ready for a neighborhood safety meeting, we go door to door knocking on doors. So we could show you, right? Like we more than once we've gone door to door, handing things, telling people, asking people to, just reach out and not to sort of suffer alone.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We have time for a couple more questions, Grace.
Thanks. Sorry, I just wanted to add a quick comment, if I may. I apologize to Corey Mallory, who's the Workforce Development Supervisor for First Followers thing. Sorry, Corey, I saw a hand up in the audience. I thought you were coming in for audience participation. James said only Dr. Parnell was presenting, but he had in the chat real quick, he just wanted to say hi and add to Dr. Regina's presentation and say that he's been working on mentoring these young men as that supervisor since 2019 and been working on the houses on Louisiana and Cottage courts. And sorry, Corey, that we didn't add you in, but I just wanted to include that.
Okay. Any other questions? Well, if you could send your presentations to cityclerk@urbanaillinois.us, that would be very helpful.
Thank you.
Great. We thank you very much for presenting tonight and for all that you do. Okay, we will move on to public input. And last week there were some questions about public input and the role of council and our council rules. So I wanted to summarize that again for the council and for the public before we start the public input portion of the agenda. To summarize, the Open Meetings Act requires that a public body provide an opportunity for members of the public to address public officials. And that requirement also provides for public bodies to establish rules governing the process. Those rules address time, for example, how much time is allowed for input, the place on the agenda, and manner, which is more related to content issues related to comments. Per our council rules, which are included with every agenda, our goal is to foster respect for the meeting process and respect for all people participating as members of the public body, city staff, and members of the general public. Personal attacks, bullying, abusive comments are not condoned. They have a significant negative impact on employee and volunteer morale. They contribute to a hostile meeting environment, discourage public participation, and really add another level of unnecessary stress to people working to maintain services and basically survive during COVID-19. Council members do have the opportunity to correct inaccurate statements or publicly discourage or condemn bullying or abusive behavior or profanity during the council comment period in each meeting. That's the part of the meeting that's entitled Council Input and Communications. The current public input rules also specifically provide that obscene or profane comments are unacceptable, and they may lead to a speaker being muted if the profanity continues. As the presiding officer, you can raise a point of order with a speaker to warn them to stop the profanity. The council member, you may also raise a point of order with the presiding officer in public comment to request they provide a verbal warning to a speaker utilizing profanity. If it continues, the speakers will be informed or may be informed. They could send the remainder of the remarks via email for inclusion in the meeting record. So to summarize, council members, presiding officers do have the ability to correct inaccurate statements, to discourage or condemn abusive or bullying input during the council comment period. And you can raise a point of order directly at profanity occurring during a meeting. All this being said, however, in support of First Amendment right to speech, we are largely dependent on members of the public being willing to respect the process and the people involved in our meetings. Responsibility for content of public input lies with the speaker. The responsibility for time and place for public input lies with the council. So again, I would ask speakers, participants in the meeting to please respect the process and respect the people and avoid personal attacks and abusive comments. Thank you. So we will go on to public input and we will begin with Alan Max Axelrod.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. Thank you so much. So I'm speaking to you today in my capacity as the campaign lead for No Ameren Shutoffs, a $0 coalition of 53 member organizations spanning the state of Illinois, North, South, East, and West, with member organizations in Indiana and Iowa. Last week, we passed our 11th resolution since April, calling on Governor J.B. Pritzker to act in the McLean County Democratic Party. And we have a similar resolution that has been allegedly agreed to be included in the Champaign County Board agenda this week. One of the things that these resolutions that are updated do, that the resolution that Urbana, being the first body to pass a resolution in 2021, again, thank you for doing so. The distinction between those resolutions and the resolutions we're passing now is, in addition to advocating for state level protections, they are advocating for federal level protections. As I have mentioned before, the Maintaining Access to Essential Services Act of 2021, again, through the legislative cycles, it's probably going to get an updated name, provides a statewide suspension of, or a countrywide suspension of utility shutoffs, restores people's utilities, erases their utility debt. There is money appropriated to the utilities to do that, both corporate and municipal, and provides additional consumer protections to folks. We are in the winter moratorium currently, and I think that some folks may have forgotten that our winter moratorium conditions were adopted earlier last year in September, right before we had 81,000 utility shutoffs in the space of 9 weeks. We are in the winter moratorium now. People are still being shut off now. Utility shutoffs are allowed if people do not enter into a deferred payment agreement and if the 24-hour forecast is above freezing. And a lot of people don't even know that they can enter into those deferred payment agreements. The Utility Disconnection Avoidance Program that in part the City of Urbana helped to pressure for its creation by the governor, helped in an automatic capacity our most vulnerable households. And we, since that program was expired, I'm trying to restrain my cat, sorry for the awkward speech there. Since that program expired at the end of June, we saw COVID caseloads increase 2 weeks later. That's a trend we've seen 3 times. We have been over 2,000 cases a day per the 7-day daily average of new COVID cases since August 3rd, over 130 days ago. And with Omicron arriving, of still some uncertain qualities about it, with utility shutoffs happening, which the National Consumer Law Center said is one of the most subtle, pernicious, and immediate health risks to folks during this pandemic, I ask humbly that the City of Urbana consider a resolution to include the federal demands or letter really whatever in writing would help to advocate for it, for the passage of the Maintaining Access to Essential Services Act. There are legislators in Illinois who could be added as sponsors, and I believe that this is something that we can do to lead and to continue to lead for positive, proactive changes in a way that is economically sensible. So please follow up with me on that. I will send an email in follow-up as well. Have a good night.
Thank you. Next up is Corey.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Hello, this is my name is Corey Mallory from the First Followers. I am one of the supervisors for the GoMad program, and I've been a part of the program since 2019. And I just wanted to add to something that Regina was saying as far as we are trying to connect with these young men and mentor them and give them something to look back on, and to have something also to have some skills under their belt to kind of go back on, and also learn a trade and have some skills to go forward with, and also some gainful employment with us. So I've been a part of this group since 2019, like I said, but it's been very helpful as well for me. Me being involved with these young men, it allows me to be able to engage with them, understand where they are in their personal lives and some of the trauma that they've dealt with, because some of the young men, they are also either, brothers of someone who's been affected by gang violence or still are being affected by gang violence, or mothers who have been a part of, the community, who are involved with the First Followers, and they've lost their sons to gang violence. I think that what we're doing is very needful and very helpful to the community. I've been a part of different communities, Oklahoma, where they've had a dream center built for, young families or just families in general who are less fortunate, and they've been able to provide, food, clothing, shelter, different things like that, low income families. And it was it was on a pretty big scale, but I could see the need for what we do here in Champaign and helping the young men, which part of what I'm doing with the GoMad program. I can see a need for it because the young men that are kind of, involved in some of these situations they don't see an end out, you know what I mean? And they're already dealing with situations and trauma and, broken homes and broken families. And on top of that, there's violence in the community. So it's almost like a hopeless type of situation that they kind of see and feel, and it's just perpetuating. And so I just feel like I just wanted to add that what I feel like we're doing with the First Followers is bringing these kids into a safe space and allowing them an opportunity to release their fears and their inhibitions to be and try to do something better than themselves. You know what I mean? And that's what we've been trying to do, gutting these houses out and building them back up. And like Grace said, doing the gardening and things like that. And a lot of the young men have gotten into the gardening, even though they felt like, oh man, that's something that a girl should be doing. But I also kind of took a little part in that. And I just feel like it was very engaging and very, we were able to kind of connect with them and, talk with them and it kind of helped them, release their feelings from, gang violence or community violence and, feeling threatened, you know what I mean? As a
Yes,
young
we do.
Black man in the community.
Corey, your
yes.
time is up, but thank you very
Okay.
much.
Yes, okay, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is James Tiger Corbin.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Council, for allowing me to speak. I am here tonight just to reiterate a lot of what you heard already by the presentations. I think that, like Regina was saying earlier, trauma is an emotional response to a negative, impactful event. Now, about us working directly with these individuals in these programs, and I work across many programs, a lot of these individuals do not understand they're in trauma or they experience trauma. So it's critical to do this get to know you phase. You want to get involved with them, get to know them. That way then you can start unpacking the trauma. You got to go back. And we done had discussions in our healing circle sometimes when we talk to these young men, some of these, they never shared certain events, violent events that happened that they witnessed. And they was able to, wow, man, I didn't know that I didn't know that affected me that way. So creating that safe space is necessary in order to move forward. That is critical. We had young men come in the program and with Grace help from different neighborhoods who were into it, violently back and forth. And at first they was like, I don't want to work with that guy. But once you create this safe space and you get them a skill set to show them there's more than just what's going on in this neighborhood. Once you create all this, you put these components together along with counseling, like Karen was saying, with the wraparound service, as well as talking to these individuals, teaching them about, I help teach the financial literacy part, how to build credit. This is how you build credit. This is how you go about buying a house. It's not done like it is on TV or in a rap song. Once you open up all these different aspects for these men, they see the world different. Now they interact. Like the Go Mad team, the small team we have now, they're from different areas. At first, they wasn't really comfortable with each other, but eventually, with Corey's help, they fell in line. Everything fall in line. And again, we keep looking for a one-stop bullet or one-stop action to stop violence, whereas this is a multi-layered component. This is not done just by one individual, and it jumps. We had a talk, talking about, well, why don't they just tell them where they at and turn them in? Well, you'll be turning in the whole neighborhood, because who's affected by that last violent act and his friends, there be the next one. This thing is a mental virus. Gun violence is a mental virus. It does not just one person that you could point them out and get him. That don't work that way. Anybody, I say, who think that way are looking at it as static. Once you arrest this individual and that group is gone, someone else steps in to take the place. So we're going to need, like Karen said, a coordinated across the board effort going with other agencies to fight this thing, as well as get them something to do. There's nothing to do here for a lot of these young men and women. So they self-medicate, drinking. All these things are tied to trauma-related events. Drinking, drugs, all these. We gotta create more opportunity for them. And that's my time, and I'm up. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is SN. Please state your name for the record.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, SN is Sarah Nixon. Hello, City Council. I just want to say that I feel gratitude to the City Council, to Chandra Bishop and Grace Wilkins for bringing in Karen Sims to give her presentation. I know Karen personally as a mentor. I know that, excuse me, I know that Karen pours all of herself into all of what she does. And I know that for CU Try, Champaign-Urbana Trauma Resilience Initiative, the need to compete for funding is so critical and so time consuming. Yet Karen is Urbana-Champaign's premier community trauma specialist. And I think she should be put on the city payroll, and that Urbana would be fortunate to have her full-time at the helm. I and many others have attended training sessions led by Karen, and engaging closely, hands-on with her organization, CU Try, helped me process trauma that I've experienced due to law enforcement and judicial failures. CU Try validated my trauma and gave me a space to start feeling human again, or feeling like a human being again, after the dehumanization that I endured by systems that should have, but did not protect my child from sexual assault. For a good portion of 2019, I chaired the Empathy Box Working Group for CU Try, which brainstormed and organized the logistics and contents of what we decided to call the Empathy Box, a box filled with comfort items that CU Try would deliver to families and victims of gun violence in the community. That concept was envisioned by Karen as a care package designed to offer comfort, resources, and support for all the people impacted by community violence. And it might seem to be a small gesture, but it was a human touch at a time of crisis, tragedy, and trauma. Karen's vision is distinguished by a full spectrum compassion perspective. She respects and responds to the trauma experienced by all involved in gun violence, from the victims to first responders, to law enforcement, to shooters and their families too. So I think I'd just like to say resources are key. Again, I think Urbana needs to hire Ms. Sims and fully, at the very least, fully fund her vision. Let's use American Rescue Plan funds to invest in existing community treasures. And I don't think you could do better than funding Ms. Sims and her organization, which are both priceless. So thanks. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Next up is first followers. Please state your name, the speaker.
So my name is Marlon Mitchell. And thanks again to the council for allowing us this space just to talk about a little something. So I just want to kind of elaborate on the presentation that was given by Dr. Regina Parnell in regards to the young men and the program that we've been running. So it kind of, just the history of it, it kind of organically, it came about organically because what we do is that, as everybody knows, that we're a reentry program that's situated here in Champaign, but we provide services to the entire Champaign County. But organically, it transpired just through conversations that we were having with young men that were coming in for drop-in center services. And most oftentimes it was community service hours because they were on probation. And so through those times that we spent with the young men and coming in looking for those services to meet the criteria for their community service, we would just ask them different questions and just kind of build a relationship with them. And from the questioning and just watching and getting to know them, oftentimes there was a certain similarity between most of them. Most of them were unemployed. Most of them had dropped out or been kicked out of school, and they were just kind of floating around. So through honest conversation, one of the things that we did, we were able to just ask them, what do you want? What are you looking for? What do you want out of life? Where would you start? And from there, we kind of built the program from there. And I can say that was back in 2017 when we first started this initiative. And so we're in our 5th cohort of the initiative. And so just to give you some numbers, because I do believe one of the council members were asking about numbers. So me personally, I have done an intake in over 60 different individuals who have come into the program over the last 5 or 6 years. Some of them have stuck and stayed a little bit longer than others, but it's always been a challenge to have, first of all, the capacity to pay people to do this type of work, but also more importantly, to pay the individuals who come in to do this type of work. So fast forwarding to here in 2021, I should say, one of the things that we've been fortunate enough is to get recognized as a CHODO for the city of Champaign, city of Urbana, and all the surrounding areas in the 217 area code for Champaign County. And so what that has allowed us to do is partner with the city of Urbana, the city of Champaign, and all these other municipalities in the context of acquiring space of dilapidated housing, vacant lots, and different things of that nature, where that we can acquire these spaces so that it'll be a training ground. And so with that being a training ground, we have had community members who have the skill set that do come in and train the young men in building construction trades and the different skills that come along with that. So as they start to acquire these skill sets, the most important part of it is this. It's not only that, but it's also being able to use our program as a mechanism to get to know who they are, where they're coming from, and what's their next step in life. And so as we get to build these relationships, you start to unpack all these different things that have layers and layers and layers of trauma, immaturity, and just different things that they don't know. But I think with the GOMAD program, it's been a very successful program, because I can honestly say out of all the different men that have come into the program, I still have some form of contact with them. But it's always been a challenge to fund the folks that are doing the work. And more importantly, like I said, providing stipends for the work that's being done. GOMAD, what I like to see is very transformational. And what I've seen is that guys come into the program from day one and they mature into a place where now they have a direction in life, and now they're starting to unpack what they want to do with themselves moving forward. So again, I appreciate you all for your time and just working with the city of Urbana on different initiatives. And we're just looking to build capacity and continue to move forward with this. But as some of the other callers said, and Karen has said as well, this is not an overnight fix. This is something that we have to continue to use the resources that we have in our community and provide the necessary resources for those that's doing this work in order to build up and build out and capture more and serve as intervention and prevention of what's happening here currently. Thank you.
Thank you, Marlon. Okay, does anyone else wish to address the Urbana City Council? Please raise your hand if you do. All right, I don't see any hands raised. We'll move on to reports from the Committee of the Whole. James?
Yes, I can report from the Committee of the Whole that the following items were placed on the consent agenda. Resolution number 2021-12-047R, a resolution for the improvement under the Illinois Highway Code State Motor Fuel Tax for West Windsor Road Resurfacing Project. And resolution number 2021-12-048R, a resolution for improvement under the Illinois Highway Code State Motor Fuel Tax for Philo Road, Colorado Avenue, and Anderson Street Resurfacing Project. And resolution number 2021-12-049R, a resolution approving a funding agreement, CU at Home Winter Shelter. Ordinance number 2021-12-049, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code Chapter 3, Section 3-43, maintaining the number of Class P liquor licenses for Zayed Salem LLC, doing business as Black Fox at 602 North Cunningham Avenue. And ordinance number 2021-12-050, An ordinance amending Urbana City Code, Chapter 3, Section 3-43, increasing the number of Class R and T liquor licenses for Sakura Japanese Cuisine Incorporated, doing business as Sakura Japanese Cuisine at 132 West Main Street. And ordinance number 2021-12-051, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code, Chapter 3, Section 3-43, increasing the number of Class GC liquor licenses for WeLocavore.com, doing business as Homegrown at 2600 Stone Creek Boulevard. And finally, resolution number 2021-12-050R, a resolution authorizing acceptance of an Illinois Arts Council Agency IACA grant for arts and culture program operating support. And I so move.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved by James, seconded by Chandra. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Evans,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Ms. Colacetti,
Yes.
Ms. Bishop,
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin,
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry.
Yes.
That motion passes. And I apologize, I realize I skipped over item E, council input and communications. So
Yes.
if you will indulge it, we will go back to that. And does anybody on the city council wish to make a comment? You have up to 3 minutes. Chandra?
Yes, I just want to convey my gratitude for the presenters tonight, and those who spoke around the same issues. This sort of thing is what I have been wanting to support, wanting to see the city of Urbana support. We have great initiatives that are going already in our community. They just need the capacity built and expanded so that they can reach more. And I would love to see us support them in that effort. That's pretty much all. So.
Okay, Jaya.
Similarly, I'd also like to thank our presenters again for tonight and thank especially Grace and Chandra as well for making sure we had these important conversations tonight. I think it's important to keep in mind that while some of these programs take a while to have a long-term impact, that it is worth recognizing that there is an immediate effect that these kinds of resources have and have been having and can continue to have in our community if we are investing in these resources that actually address the root causes of violence in our community. So grateful for the work that is being done and would also like to make sure that we are keeping our local experts in mind as we are looking for solutions to our community problems.
Any other comments? Grace?
Thank you. Don't want to be too repetitive, but I was going to say the same things that have already been said well. Thank you to our presenters and, supporting their expertise and experience and realizing that these things take a lot of time and a lot of hard work to get going. And I feel optimistic that there are already grassroots organizations very connected to the community that already have a few years of the groundwork underway. So I find that very encouraging and agree that I would love to be able to support them more. Like I said, a little bit with my work with first followers, have really seen the importance of those relationships and building trust, and that it makes a big difference versus, a more generic program that might not be able to have those long-term trusting relationships. And I think that makes a really big difference. And it's very meaningful working with some of these individuals, some of these young people, and realizing, something we take for granted that could be a huge skill Like, I love resumes. I'm just a resume nerd. And, some of these young men, we're going to a job fair and one of them asked me, what's a resume? And it's like, oh, honey, we're going to write a resume. And, things like that we can just take for granted. And I think it's really great when we can all throw in support and different skills. And I think it's really impressive what these groups have been doing without that kind of systemic support and funding, and definitely further supporting them. Thank you.
Any other council member comments? Okay, we'll move back to the regular agenda. Thank you, James, for the report out of the committee.
All right. Next up, the committee passed ordinance number 2021-11-048, an ordinance revising the fiscal year 2022 annual budget, also known as budget amendment number 4. And I believe this was recommended for approval as well.
Yes, and I would ask if Elizabeth Hannon could be promoted, if she's not already, to be a panelist.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, moved by James, seconded by Mary Alice. Any discussion? I'm looking for a list. Whoops. Is Elizabeth attending? Oh, there she is. Great. Okay, any questions for Elizabeth? Grace.
Thank you. I have two. I'll start with this one. And I did ask this last week, and I'm sorry, I've still been trying to understand and didn't have a chance to call and figure it out this week. But I don't know if you could just explain again about the Community Development Grants Fund and the administrative and planning costs, because I do understand that going toward that time. But my question is that position grants funded? Or if not, then where does the allocated pay for wages go when there's a grant paying for those services?
I believe Sheila could answer that.
Yeah, and Grace, if I remember correctly, this is about the home ARP funds?
Yes.
Okay. So that administrative cost HUD allows us a set amount. And the way that we do it internally is every day I keep a timesheet. The grant staff keeps a timesheet of where they spend their time. And then quarterly, we bill our time to those specific activities. And so we know coming up that we're going to be spending time on the home ARP program, although hopefully, not a huge chunk. We'll be able to hire a consultant to help with part of it. But we don't have any salary budget set aside for that particular line item. So we have to allocate funding there. It's not going to increase salaries of existing staff. It's just going to allow us to allocate our time to where we're actually spending it. Does that help?
Yes, I guess I'm still just a little confused, but it sounds like, so there's a budgeted salary that doesn't encompass all of the work that's being done. Is that correct then?
We have to budget our time. Like when we're audited by the city auditors and by HUD, they want to see what specifically we're spending our time on. So I have a timesheet that's got CDBG admin and home admin, emergency solutions grant time. There's about 12 to 14 different activities or tasks. And then, like I said, daily, Braden and I attach our time to where we've spent our time. And that way, all of those auditors can make sure that we're really allocating our time to how we really spent it. And, like I said, since home ARP money is new, we don't have that salary line item. And so in order to be able to bill my time to it, we had to add it as part of this budget amendment.
And so then is all of the time for the community development grants, or is that the correct thing? But anyway, for those positions, is it all based off of the time for those grant activities? There's not like city just paying a salary?
We are paid a set amount, but then we are reimbursed or we are billing the grants, specific grants for the actual time that we spent. And there are limitations, you know, on how much we can do. So like emergency solutions grant, there's a set dollar amount that we can't exceed. There's a certain amount for the CDBG grant that we can't exceed. So, you know, it's important that we track our time to how we actually spend it and then charge it back quarterly.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And my other question was just curious about the meeting and agenda software. I was just curious a little bit about, you know, maybe a little what it is, what are some advantages, and maybe if this is something new that should be helpful, or if this is something we already are using.
Carol could answer that.
So this meeting and agenda software is to automate the process of building an agenda. So it creates an approval flow for items that are going to be reviewed. So a staff member would submit it, and then rather than us passing around a bunch of emails with possible different versions of council reports and so forth, this automates it. And once it gets its final approval, then it goes into a queue. And basically the clerk just it will almost self-populate the agenda. So it's going to streamline a lot of our staff efforts and help us avoid, you know, dropping stitches, and you know, it'll help with version control too. So we're all pretty excited about it.
And so then it sounds like this is new, that's not being used currently.
It's new.
Cool, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, we have a motion by James, a second by Mary Alice. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Evans,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
You're muted, Sharice.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Sorry.
Ms. Colasetti,
Yes.
Ms. Bishop,
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin,
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry,
Yes.
Mayor Marlin.
Yes. That motion passes. James?
All right, next, ordinance number 2021-12-052, an ordinance levying taxes for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2021 and ending June 30th, 2022. I believe this was just referred to the city council without recommendation.
Would you like to move approval?
I move approval.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Moved by James, seconded by Chandra. Any further discussion? Okay, will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Evans,
Yes.
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Ms. Bishop,
Yes.
Ms. Colasetti,
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin,
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey.
Yes.
That motion passes.
All right, next ordinance number 2021-12-053, an ordinance directing the Champaign County Clerk to abate the tax levy for the general corporate fund for the tax year beginning July 1st, 2021 and ending June 30th, 2022. I believe this also was referred without recommendation, and I so move.
Is there a second, please?
I'll second.
Moved by James, second by Mary Alice. Further discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Quisenberry,
Yes.
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin,
Yes.
Mr. Evans,
Yes.
Ms. Bishop,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Ms. Colacetti.
Yes.
That motion passes.
And
Last item.
finally, ordinance number 2021-12-054. An ordinance directing the Champaign County Clerk to abate a portion of the 2021 related general obligation bonds, series 2014, and this was passed the City Council with a recommendation for approval. So motion from the Committee of the Whole.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second.
Moved by James, seconded by Chandra. Further discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Evans,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry,
Yes.
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Ms. Bishop,
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin,
Yes.
Ms. Colacetti.
Yes.
That motion passes. And that concludes the agenda items. Thank you, James. Next item, reports of special committees. We have none. Reports of officers. Carol?
I just have two things. One is a reminder that on a reminder for all of the council members, and then to the extent that the public isn't aware, we will continue the council strategic goal setting that we started on with Kevin James, but Kevin won't be with us. We're finishing up the action items for the different strategies, continuing to work in the small groups. Elizabeth and I will meet with James. Thank you for your email earlier. James can't be there on Wednesday, so we were in a small group, Elizabeth Hannon, James Quisenberry, and myself, so we'll meet separately, which we can do since it's only one council member, to work on the action items there. And then you should be receiving, if you haven't already, another poll for a final session in January with Kevin to work as a total group to finalize the council strategic goals and the action steps that that we agreed to, or that you all agreed to collectively. So Wednesday night, starting at 5:30 at ILEAS, that this week's session will reconvene. And then the other thing is, last week, a couple of the council members asked for an update on our partnership with Rosecrans, the CCRT, and Lieutenant Corey Coker and the team members will be in attendance to make a presentation at the council meeting next Monday night on the 20th.
And that's the crisis co-responder team. Grace, did you have a question?
Yes. Thanks for the update. And you said that this Wednesday it's at 3:30 to 5:30, right?
No, it's at 5:30.
Let's start at 5:30. Oh, okay. I had the doodle poll thing wrong. Okay, good to know. Thank you. And then I was wondering if there was a presentation or I can ask questions about this failure to comply report, if this is an appropriate time for that.
Sure.
Sheila's here. I think she can answer any questions, I think.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the update. My understanding, looking back at the ordinance, is that this was the updated ordinance for issuing fines automatically for buildings with code issues, particularly safety and fire safety. And please correct me if that's not the case. And so I appreciate this update and following up on that. And my question was, does it escalate to any further fines or litigation? Like, for example, one of them, has a balance due from 2019, and especially with something so important as, fire and building safety. I'm just wondering if there are other steps to kind of enforce this even more.
I'm not sure, Grace. I will reach out to Nick and get an answer in our legal team and then let you know. I'll just send a note to all council so everybody gets the same information.
Thank you. And then other reports, if I can just throw out some ideas for the executive. I think it would also, I'd be interested in reports from the Human Rights and Equity Officer about housing enforcement. I think that's an interesting topic that we've all been kind of curious to get an update on. And possibly in Community Engagement Officer, just about community engagement and whatever efforts are going on in that department are some reports that I'd be interested in the future.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other reports of officers? I did want to share one item that came in today is there's a really important bill working its way through in the House of Representatives, Federal House of Representatives right now. It's HR 5735. It's passed the Senate. This is legislation that's been promoted by the U.S. Conference of Mayors that would give additional flexibility to the ARPA spending related to calculating revenue losses, kind of cuts some of the red tape there. It expands the use for infrastructure. And the third really important component of this bill is that it would allow ARPA funds to be used for emergency relief from natural disasters or the negative economic impact of natural disasters. And in light of the devastating tornadoes that tore through 4 states this past weekend, this is especially important. So I've already reached out to our congressional representative, and according to Congressman Davis's office, currently he is signed on as a co-sponsor, and he is currently the only co-sponsor in Illinois congressional delegation. So if you have contacts among other representatives, it would be great to reach out, and I can send the information to the council members. And your advocacy would be much appreciated. All right. We have no new business before the council, and with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.